I'm Rosie Hardy. This is Rosie Hardy Gardening, and this is the first of our Q&As for June. Let's get going. Hello, I've planted Gora on 2 different occasions in the USA, Michigan, Zone 6A. Both times they've not returned in the spring. The varieties I've tried are hardy to my zone. Can you give me advice? I love the plant and would like to have it in my yard. Okay, so the Gora, or now called Oenothera, are a plant which can be hardy, but you do need to treat it in the right way. I do have another video regarding how to overwinter them, but sometimes you've got to do something else. Now, one way of keeping them going is always make sure that you take a cutting, and that would be a young tip cutting that you overwinter inside in a frost-free area, somewhere where it gets light. The other thing is, try giving it, especially here in the UK, I know you're from the USA, but what works over here sometimes is giving them a cut back at the end of September. They then regrow at the base and they create a really good basal clump, and that goes through the winter. Otherwise, try the half cut down, give them a cover over, maybe with some fleece, and see if you can get them through that way. Somebody here is from France and they've got a bank of a stream, wanting me to suggest something for them to be able to plant. It's something where it can either be a complete torrent or it can be dried out, so quite a difficult area. Saying there are certain things that actually work, well, that's given me an idea. I would say, because you've got lily of the valley and a still be working quite well, and this is a calcareous soil, have you tried baptisia? That will like something like those conditions. The other thing that I would think about that might be worth trying is something like Cirsium rivulari, either straight Atrapurpureum or Trevor Felley's Find. I know it's recommended to divide plants in the spring or autumn. Why can't I do it in the summer? Flowering plants go into a time when they are just dormant, and then they rest and then they regrow. What you are doing by dividing in the autumn or the spring is you are dividing a plant that flowers in the spring, you divide in the autumn, flowers in the autumn, divide in the spring. You're giving it that time to have that moment of being underground, undisturbed, and then as it's coming back up through to life, you're dividing it. Now, you can divide in the summer, but you've got to have the right conditions. So you've got to have enough cool, you've got to have enough rainwater, and you know, sometimes you do need to divide in the summer because you're moving and therefore you can split stuff up. But you've got to manage and look after those plants far more if you do it in the summer than if you do it in the autumn or the spring. Oh, this is a lovely one. Why has sedum changed its name? A lot of you will now be seeing that a lot of the sedums that you grow, the autumn flowering sedums that is, have changed their name to Hylotelephium. Now this is all to do with the botanists. They are recategorizing things because they are now doing DNA, genetic sequencing of plants and finding that they actually belong to another group. So that's the reason for them changing. There are, however, still sedums, and those are the little rockery ones or the spring flowering ones. What would you recommend I should plant underneath an orangeberry, a pyracantha in other words? They are quite a big growing plant, they cover the area and there's not a lot of ground underneath them. They have quite a bit of roots, so they will be taking a lot of the moisture out of the ground. They will be taking quite a lot of food out of the ground. So you want something that is going to grow and be able to look, something that will grow and be happy in that sort of situation. So you're looking at shade-loving plants such as Gallium odoratum, Lamium maculatum, or even one of the ground-covering hardy geraniums. It is generally advised not to plant trees and shrubs, e.g. roses, during the summer. If you've already bought one, however, is it better to leave it in the pot it came in during this heat versus putting it into the ground without breaking the roots as much as you can and watering frequently? Would transferring into a bigger pot be better, even though the plant will be transplanted again in the autumn? Now, If you've bought something and you're wanting it to go into the ground, I would always say the ground is best. But if you're in a real drought situation, then you're not going to be able to keep that ground wet enough. You're not going to be able to keep that plant cool enough. So therefore, transplanting into a slightly larger pot that you can put in a situation such as semi-shade and where you can keep it watered well enough is probably advisable, and then get it into the ground when the conditions are correct. Greetings, welcome back. My question is, can you recommend a particular top dressing or fertilizer to get the most impact and good growth from a Veronicastrum virginicum? Many thanks, and this person lives in East Anglia on the coast. My go-to product for any plants that are flowering is sulphate of potash, and this should be put on in the spring. If the plants are not sending up flower at this time of the year, middle of the summer, then any food you give them is going to be for them for next year to build up their reserves, and a tomato feed in a liquid form is always good because it is high in potash. Hello Rosie, my bearded iris didn't flower this year, first time in 10 years since planting them. If you haven't split them up, then I would recommend you do so. You haven't said that, so I would suggest perhaps that you need to split them up, move them around, reinvigorate the soil, and that way they will be better. Somebody else here, how do I stop my bearded iris from being decimated? I'm not quite sure what you mean by decimated. Either the flowers are not flowering properly or something's eating them. It's difficult because you haven't said exactly what is wrong. Bearded iris need to be in a sunny-ish position. They do require a bit of food, and once they've finished flowering, obviously yours is having a bit of a problem, do cut the leaf back into that fan shape, because then the leaves don't look awful is one thing, but also there's enough foliage there then for them to refeed themselves. Give them a little bit of sulphate of potash, or lift and move might be a good idea. This is somebody who has had a number of geranium silostemma which they bought from us several years ago, and they are starting to not flower as well as they used to, and is wondering whether feeding or is it now time for the divisions. I would say as soon as a plant is not functioning and not producing the flower that you'd expect it to do, then it's very definitely time to start thinking about lifting and dividing. And geranium silostemma I would do in the autumn, lift them, divide the clumps, reinvigorate the soil by putting in plenty of garden manure, and then place them out like that. If you've got enough splits, put a couple in pots, and then once you have room in the garden, you can find places for those plants to go. Thank you very much for watching, and please do subscribe to the channel.